So, for the perfect organizational structure, let me first start by talking about my role here at Otis Elevator, where I report to the Chief Digital Officer. The Chief Digital Officer is part of the executive leadership team, which brings cyber front and center at the senior executive level. I have seen organizations where the CISO reports to Chief Financial Officer, the head of legal. You see a lot more common reporting to the Chief Information Officer. The most critical part about it is that IT operations and cyber have equal voices. Sometimes cyber is tucked underneath IT ops, and it does not give the visibility it needs at the executive level. And that comes really problematic when you report to the Chief Information Officer, because operations will always take priority as most CIOs are focused towards ops. Outside of that, it's really the rest is about relationships. Key relationships with your legal departments, your engineering departments, HR, other business units. You really have to understand the business, especially in a global environment. It's not just about the regions, but what the users need out in the regions. I would say as long as you're getting the voice at the executive leadership team and the senior executive level, including the CEO, it's less about who you're reporting to than reporting out what the risks are to the environment.
The CISO position is relatively new. For a long time, it reported to the CIO. I actually report to the CFO and have in the last two organizations, and that works very well. In a lot of IT organizations where you have the CISO reporting to the CIO, it's hard to say, well, that application doesn't work. Ultimately, I think where people will go is that it reports to the CEO. But in a lot of cases, there's a lot more C-level positions. You've got the CIO, CFO, COO, you've got the Chief Digital Officer, you've got the Diversity Officer, the People Officer. So, pretty soon everybody's going to report to the CEO. I think ultimately that's probably the right place for it. Where I sit today reporting to the CFO and then reporting to the board quarterly works very well. And quite frankly, wherever you sit in the organization, I would argue that you can be effective as long as you're working on building the relationships that are necessary. I have a great relationship with the Chief Digital Officer for CAR. We've talked a couple times today on various topics, and I have the ability, if needed, to redirect development activities if we find something. It's a very, very collaborative relationship. We have worked very hard to turn that away from the Dr. No, the typical security, no, you can't do that, to the Dr. KNOW, where it's, hey, let us help you build that better. I've been doing this for 34 years now, so I may have seen some of the things people are trying to accomplish and may have a different way to think about it or a better way, or in some cases, a more relaxed view on when we have to do something. Having that very collaborative relationship kind of obviates the need to be in the reporting to the CEO because I report to the CEO, so you should listen to me. It's more, we've built the relationship, so let's have a discussion.
I just so happen to have the perfect role. So I am in a converged security organization, which is why I have a CSO title, where we have physical, fraud, cyber, privacy, all of that together. I actually have risk and compliance as well under one roof, and so I report to the CEO. In the past, I've kind of argued different positions. I think I'm at the point now where I don't think it should fall under the CIO, CTO. I do think maybe CEO or COO, and it's going to vary by industry, it's going to vary by company, but to me, that's probably the ideal structure. I just so happen to be living the ideal structure, I think, for us and for our company.
In my organization, I report to the Chief Information Officer, but in an organizational chart of my organization, I report to the agency head or the CEO. So I kind of report to both. But for day-to-day operations, I report to the CIO. In a perfect world, I think the CISO and the CIO should be equal, and that they should work together and not be subservient to each other or vice versa. Security is, again, it's an afterthought when it's thought of as part of the information technology services. When it is a standalone object, it is granted the authority that it needs to implement policy, to change policy, to enforce policy. When everything goes through the IT department, it's all an afterthought again, and that's not where we want to be.
Who would a CISO report to in a perfect organization? And the answer is, it depends. And the reason I'm going to, cop out and say it depends again is every organization is different. Every organization has a different mission. Most businesses, enterprises, private ones are in it to make money. The mission is to make money. The company's around to make money. But again, the mission can differ whether you're government or nonprofit, all of that. But who is going to best support the CISO? Is that going to be a direct report to the CEO? But if the CEO really doesn't have time to support the CISO, and the CISO is just out there trying to save the world, but because the CEO is not giving them support, the rest of the board, the rest of the executive team aren't giving support, then it's probably in name only reporting to the CEO. Does it make sense to report to the chief risk officer? Security is all about mitigating risk. Minimizing risk, mitigating risk. It's not about securing, it's about managing risk. So I really like to see this trend reporting to the chief risk officer. If the CIO or chief digital officer or chief information officer is the traditional place you put it, what is that person's role in the organization, and are they the best one to support? Or are they so focused on uptime, keeping the lights on, business as usual, then that's probably not someone who's going to best support the CISO. And I'd say don't put the CISO in that organization. So it really comes down to the business itself. It comes down to what the mission is and who is best going to support that security officer.
If I could design the perfectly organized org structure, I would have the CISO reporting directly to the CEO. I think that would apply in most all scenarios, simply because the CISO needs to have no concerns or worries about what he or she needs to report as part of their job. It's almost like the fox watching the hen house. I can tell you about a scenario where we were working with a chief information security officer, and we had done a penetration test and we had identified some concerns. Well, the second concern we learned after that was the CISO's concern about reporting that to the CIO, because they had indicated that that was going to be a risk previously. It was taken lightly. And it was believed that that was taken lightly because they didn't want to respond to what they knew had already existed. So we need to do whatever we can to give them the autonomy to raise those red flags without the fear of being fired. And only then you're really going to start to see all of the risk reported within the organization. Today, I think we're getting piecemeal risk, if you will. And an indication of that, you're starting to see more businesses shift away from cybersecurity risk. We beat that story to death. Every day you see something about a cyber attack and the risk associated with that. Businesses don't just care about cyber risk. They care about risk to the business. And in order for you to be able to report on that risk, you need to have someone who can communicate what that risk is in a common language across the entire organization. And when they do it, they cannot have fear of any ramifications on what they're reporting.